are the numbers on old Supertramp here? Crime of the Century.
From best ever albums in the 1970s, this comes in at number 68, number 4 in 1974, number 275 of all time. It's Supertramp's highest rated album on best ever albums, and it is not on the Rolling Stone list.
Oh, okay. Is any Supertramp album on the Rolling Stone list?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
All right. Well, Crime of the Century, it was released in September of 1974, and this is actually their third album and the first one that we're covering. And I think Supertramp has one of the funniest ways that a band started when it was formed. Supertramp was formed by Rick Davies, who's the lead vocalist and pianist on this, and he was in a band called The Joint from 1969 that was funded by a Dutch millionaire, Stanley August Missegash, or Missegage, also known as Sam. So yeah, okay. A Dutch millionaire basically created Supertramp. And
is that like the Backstreet Boy guy? Like, who is that? What's that guy's name?
Lou Pearlman.
Yeah, that guy.
Well, I think he's canceled these days. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I tried to find out more about this because I was like, what is the deal? How did a Dutch millionaire get involved with a rock and roll band? But I guess him and Rick Davies were just friends, and I guess he had money. So I thought that was funny. However, the millionaire had become unhappy with The Joint and offered Davies a chance to form his own band. So Davies split off, and that band dissolved, and he recruited Roger Hodgson on bass, Richard Palmer on guitar, and Keith Baker on drums. And two of those three original guys would not be on this album. They had originally named themselves Daddy, which, you know, John is Daddy, so and
yeah, apparently, yeah.
And after several months of rehearsal, they only had 4 songs, 2 of which were covers, so they weren't very productive. And in 1970, Keith Baker left the group, and they renamed themselves Supertramp to avoid confusion with another band named Daddy Longlegs. And then Supertramp is named after a 1908 book called The Autobiography of Supertramp by W.H. Davies, no relation, who was a Welsh poet and writer, and wrote about this tramp who was, you know, went around the world and stuff.
Was super.
Yeah, he was super. He was super at his job. The Supertramp was one of the first groups signed to the UK branch of A&M Records, and their first self-titled album was released July 14th, 1970 in the UK and Canada. It would not be released, interestingly enough, until 1977 in the US. The band lineup went through several changes between 70 and this album in 74. Richard Palmer left in December 1970, and the person who had replaced Keith Baker, whose name was Robert Miller, also left. Their second album was called Indelibly Stamped, came out in June of 1971, and had Frank Farrell and Kevin Curry on it, and they had replaced Baker and Miller. And Roger Hodgson, who is on this album, he switched to guitar, and Davies became backup vocals. Both Hodgson and Davies on this second album and subsequent albums wrote and composed the songs separately for the band on this and that was kind of their dynamic. They were friendly with each other, but they weren't necessarily, their personalities didn't mesh. So they always either one or the other wrote the songs that Supertramp would eventually perform, and they didn't really collaborate together, but contractually all of the songs are credited to both of them. So the second album sold less than even their debut did, and Farrell and Curry left the band, and the Dutch millionaire withdrew his support in October of 1972.
So before this album.
Yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
So this was really like a make or break album for the band. I think they were on the verge of like, if something doesn't happen, you know, we're gonna have to do something else, or go separate ways. And the summer of 1973, the lineup was solidified, which is the lineup on this album, and that would be the lineup that would remain in place for the next 10 years. So this is really kind of where the lineup success came from. They have Dougie Thompson on bass on this album, Bob Siebenberg on drums, percussion, and he was credited as Bob C. Benberg on the album.
So it's a nom de plume there.
Yeah. Well, it's like his last name was misconstrued or something. It's separated out.
Guy incognito.
Yeah, exactly. You've got John Hewlywell on sax, woodwinds, synth, and backing vocals. Hodgson is now on guitar, and Rick Davies is on lead and backing vocals, piano, other key instruments. There's lots of different keys on this, and Moog synthesizer. During this time, Hodgson started composing songs on keyboards, specifically the Wurlitzer electric piano, which I think is kind of a founding sound of Supertramp. It's very recognizable when I hear Supertramp songs. Also during this time, this is when Hodgson and Davies started to drift apart more personality-wise. Co-producer Ken Scott, along with other members of Supertramp, said both of the men had very, very different personalities. It wasn't sort of a combative relationship. They just didn't hang out. While Supertramp songs are, as I said, they're credited to both of the members. Supertramp needed a hit record, and they sure got it with this one. Crime of the Century was released in 1974, and it was their commercial breakthrough. It reached number 4 in the UK, 38 in the US, and 4 in Canada. And this is a fun fact. They were super popular in Canada. This album was in Canada's top 100 for 3 years in a row, and eventually sold over 1 million copies there in Canada alone. And Canada's population, that's like every household in Canada having a copy of Supertramp. Dreamer was the band's first hit single, and Bloody Well Right hit the US top 40 in May of 1975, and that was the other single off this album. But it would be their only hit in the US for more than 2 years until later albums. Like other British bands, I didn't mention that they were English, and their record label sent them to a farm to practice and prepare for this band, continuing the trend. And
no Rolling Stone studio?
No. That was not
mobile studio.
I kept an eye out for that for sure. However, it was recorded at several studios, including Ramport Studios, which was owned by The Who. They recorded approximately 42 demo songs, of which 8 appeared on this album, and others would appear on later albums. And also, Hodgson had actually recorded a demo of Dreamer back when he was 19 at his mother's house, and that was kind of the basis for the band's making the song for the album. He was 24 when the album came out, so that was a significant time period difference. And the band members also felt that the title track on this album, which is the last track, Crime of the Century, was the strongest song on the album. Robert Christgau, the Village Voice, was ambivalent on this album, calling them straight-ahead art rock, which he called Queen without the preening and Yes without the pianistics and meter shifts. So I thought that was funny. And yeah, all the band members are still alive. I believe this is the first time that this has happened on Combing the Stacks. All the band members.
At least the first time of a band you ever covered.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't fact check that, but definitely the one that I've covered. So, Crime of the Century, Supertramp. What's your guys' relationship with Supertramp, if you have one, and what did you think of this album?
I think I'm up. I knew the name of the band, Supertramp. That was about it. Yep. And when I listened to this record, I recognized one song, which was Bloody Well Right. Just the chorus part. Like, it's not even really recognized it very well, just a little bit. So this album, I'm mixed on. I think.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. I think I will say this. I think every song has at least one moment that I'm like, I really like that.
Yeah.
This to me was almost like a prog album, because there's a lot of different movements and different parts of the songs, and I think, like I said, there was plenty of parts in here that I thought were great. But there were other parts that left me, a little flat, a little not liking so much, or just kind of curious as to some of the decisions that were made. I think the opening track, School, is a good example, because I think that there's two really cool parts of that, but they're sandwiched in between kind of like this space where there's like kind of noise going on and a little bit of music in the background, but it's pushed to the back, and it's a little disjointed, and and it took away something from that song. I'm like, you had some cool ideas here. Why don't we just stick with that, instead of trying to throw in some of this other stuff in there. I heard a lot of other artists in here that, at various points in time. I heard Billy Joel in here like several times. I thought that there were several songs that were kind of Billy, and as well as Elton John. But I got some Who, like the beginning of Asylum sounded like something that the Who might have done, like from Tommy or something like that, kind of like this dramatic rock opera kind of ballady entrance. And I think Asylum actually might have been my favorite song on the album. That had a great chorus to it. And I thought that was a really well done song. But I was hearing, heard a little bit of Floyd, a little bit of the Beatles. Parts of me, I'm like, I think this is what ELO might sound like, but I'm not sure, because I don't know a ton of ELO. But I don't know, maybe it was the cover, and I know that ELO kind of has spacey covers too, so maybe that was just slipping into my subconscious. Actually, Dreamer might have been my least favorite song on here. I really didn't care for that chorus. I just kind of, that goofy piano part. Yes, that was another band that I got through this, was Yes. And maybe that's because the voice is a little similar to Rick Wakeman's, I felt. I do think Crime of the Century is a very cool ending. Like, I love the ending of that song. Thought it would have been better if they had like a guitar solo over it instead of the orchestration that they were doing. That could have like rocked out, and I don't know, maybe they didn't really have a lot of big guitar parts, so it was more of a piano based type of album, so maybe that just wasn't part of what they were doing. But there's some catchy, bouncy stuff on here. Hide in Your Shell, the third track, had some good full chorus, very catchy, bouncy kind of thing going on. So I liked it. I didn't love it. And it was another album that I think that I was drawing on certain parts, being like, oh yeah, that's really good. But like, it just didn't sustain, throughout the songs or throughout the albums enough for me to go like, oh man, I love this. But, which again is a little disappointing, because I think that there are plenty of elements in here that I do like, but it was a little choppy for me. It was a little uneven, I think. But what was good was very good, I thought.
Interesting. Okay, John.
Gotcha. Well, you said, what is my relationship to Supertramp? And the relationship is largely later in their career.
Yeah.
Like Breakfast in America in particular, that album.
Yes.
The song Breakfast in America, the Logical song, which I think I actually sang on one of the episodes, right, a couple things ago. So obviously I know that one. And, Oh Darling, right? I remember that was on there and stuff. So I knew them there. I did not know this era of Supertramp. I have kind of, those were classic rock staples, so I kind of would say I liked those. I wouldn't say I loved them, but I liked those. This album really doesn't sound like that version of Supertramp as much to me. This one sounds like a prog rock band, which Matt mentioned. To me, this is it's not like prog-y, it's definitely a prog rock album, right? To me, at least, to my ears. I don't know. Like, to me, a prog rock album like is marked by the complexity, I think. And this didn't seem it's not that it was, basic by any means, but it didn't seem to have like the virtuoso stuff, that I would expect from like a Yes, right? Or different bands like that, like you mentioned, or Genesis. And the hooks didn't speak to me a whole lot on this album. I'll be very honest. There were definitely songs I liked, but I liked, if I look back on it, I would say School and Bloody Well Right were probably my two favorite songs on the album. Much like Matt, I absolutely could have left Dreamer. as a song for sure. Crime of the Century was,
unfortunately,
Crime of the Century was interesting. I feel about that song like how Matt felt about the album. There were bits and pieces I liked in that song, and there were bits and pieces that kind of went on. I shouldn't say went on too long, because the song wasn't that long. It was like 5.5, I think. It just, for whatever, it didn't take it a notch above. I didn't really have an emotional connection to this album. And as I was listening to the lyrics and then reading the lyrics, it seemed to be largely about like youth, kind of. It seemed to be what was the theme of? Was it youth alienation or
alienation, like disaffection? Anger, I think, is in there too.
I mean, when you read the lyrics and hear them, it's pretty clear that's what it is. But like, I would have thought the album would have sounded a little more, like, I guess, angry or edgy, but it didn't come across in the music. So it was weird to read the lyrics I was reading and hear them, and then not really hear it reflected in the sonic landscape of it. So I would have to say I didn't love this one. I got to be honest with you. It was fine, and there was certainly nothing offensive, and it wasn't like God. But this one would fall in the category for me of I don't think I'd revisit this one for me personally.
Yeah, I was thinking about Supertramp a lot, obviously, and they are like a prog band with pop sensibility. That's kind of where I kind of place them. I think if you were thinking about the prog spectrum, they're probably on one end in like the entry level prog. You can get the elements.
Prog 101.
Yeah, you can get the elements of prog in this, and then like say, okay, if you want to go deeper, you can talk about some of those other bands that we've talked about, like Yes and Jethro Tull and things like that, and then go on to the other end of the spectrum with Moody Blues and Genesis and things like that. But yeah, so that's kind of where they're at there. And I think as a result, hearing from what you guys said, they're kind of not prog enough, or they're not pop enough, and they're in between, and it didn't work for you. I'm kind of in the same mode. I appreciated the pop aspects of this album a lot. I think that's where the catchiness got me. I feel like the first 3 songs are really good, strong opening to the song. I thought they were all really listenable, and then as the album went on, I kind of didn't like it as much, and Crime of the Century kind of doesn't sound, because it's almost more proggy than the rest of the album. It doesn't sound like the rest of the album, if that makes sense. And as you guys know, I'm kind of mixed on prog in general, so that was my reaction to this album. I was mixed on it. This album is very like piano and key forward focused. It's not like guitar backed like a lot of other rock albums that we've talked about, and it's different from other prog albums in that respect too. I think there's not as many keys or as types of keys on there. What I'm saying is it's only one aspect of other prog rock bands. King Crimson also is another prog band we've talked about that sprung to mind, but this is very key forward, and I think and the voice too of Davies and Hodgson is kind of a higher pitched voice too. So between the electronic keys and the high pitched voice, that is like very distinctive Supertramp. My relationship to them is I know a lot more Supertramp songs than I thought, but I've never like sought them out or even pieced together that they were all Supertramp. I just thought of them as some sort of like 70s era rock band, I think. I don't have any sort of emotional connection to them. Like John said, I think they're just kind of a classic rock staple that fits in well with that. I do like when they throw the guitar in there. There's some good like guitar jam parts in there, or elements that they throw in, and they are like other prog bands. They're not afraid to throw in other instruments as well. Some interesting ones that I looked in the research is in Hide Your Shell, somebody plays a saw in the background, which you can hear. I thought it was
like the bendy saw with a high pitch.
I thought it was a theremin at first, but when I looked it up, I was like, oh, it's a saw. Okay. And they throw some horns in too, like on Bloody Well Right. I thought the opening of School sounds like the Bruce Springsteen song with a harmonica. It could be like that sort of opening, and then later on they play the glass harp on Dreamer, which is basically like the water glasses filled with different amounts of water and somebody playing.
Oh God,
the
really?
thing
That's
on
what that's
it.
called?
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't know that. And then I also hear it on If Everyone Was Listening, that sounded like the most like a Pink Floyd song to me. So I definitely think they're drawing on those other things, but they also sound like themselves in a lot of ways. I think I pick up on a distinct sound between the keys and their singing that says, okay, that's a Supertramp song. I feel like I can pick it out. If a bunch of songs were played in a row, I would know as a result. I'm interested to hear the later album because I think I know more songs from that, and that is a more popular album, Breakfast in America. Do we cover that, I think?
It is it's hovering. It's at 92 right now in the 70s on Best Ever Albums, but I'm not sure if we're doing a proper...
So maybe between that or Cold Listen Hot Take, we'll probably cover it, I think, and I think we'll all recognize more songs than that. But yeah, I was to sum it up, I was a little mixed. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like mind-blowing or like a new discovery for me or anything like that.
I'll say the thing too about prog albums that I find interesting, or typically with prog, is different key signatures and changing the key signatures and the flashy, playing. There, you're right. There isn't that really here. It's proggy in the sense of just changing the direction of the song, like doing, throwing in different parts and kind of mashing them all together. So there isn't that flashiness, and maybe this is something that would be more appealing because it's an easier listen. I wouldn't say it's not a hard listen, right. But it's also, I don't know, it's a little unfocused for me. I just, sometimes I'm just like, I don't know why they went that direction, or just even when they did go in that direction, I'm like, it's like Rudy seems like a really drawn out song with like overdone orchestration, and just kind of trying to do too much. So, it just didn't, totally land with me. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I thought you'd be more into it. So when you said you're middle of the road,
there's elements in here that are up my alley, for sure. But it wasn't like, it was like, okay, that's fine. I didn't hate it. It was, it was good, but I didn't, I was trying to, put myself in a position where I was like, okay, am I really, did I get this fully? You know what I mean? Do I need to listen to this more? Like, this was the one that I had to listen to the most this week. Because Kraftwerk was an easy, you don't have to listen to Kraftwerk a ton of times, to really get what they're doing. And Springsteen, I've known that album forever. So, this one I had to actually, and it just never really went up to the next level. So in the middle, I guess, I'm thumbs in the middle.
Yeah. All right, John, sounds like you were the same way based on your review.
Yeah, actually, very similar thoughts to Matt. It's kind of like, there were bits that I liked, but it just didn't congeal together into something that stood out for me. And I think as we're hitting a lot of these 70s albums, and we're getting albums that are either great to my ear or interesting to my ear, I think it might have stood out in the fact that it both didn't read as great to my ear or overtly. And maybe it's just the context of, what we're listening to now, and maybe it wouldn't have fared as rough if it was, when we were kind of listening to more albums maybe from the early 70s that were more straight ahead and not. But, when I'm in this era now that we're listening to of stuff that's sort of reinventing the wheel all across the board, it kind of stands out for its conventional nature. And even compared to its peers like Genesis and Yes and stuff, where, whether we like them or not, they're just doing more stuff. Yep. And I think that's where it's like sort of like, you called it starter. I would call it like sort of warmed over is too harsh, but like, a little bit more basic.
Yeah. Well, it's as we listen to all these albums and move through the 70s, it takes more to rise to the top in our estimation. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're all in sync with Supertramp. You're just okay, Supertramp.